Good morning, everyone, on a Sunday morning. I guess many of you are still, yes, it's already on Zoom, I think. I thank you for being here physically. Maybe mentally we're still in bed, such a nice day to sleep in, but we'll try my best to try to share the debates, discussions about what money is like nowadays, because money is part of our life, and we use a lot of types of money without having to question what they are. But in reality, there's so many types of money in the economy, and we'll talk about reasons why we can live with so many types of money, and also why there are attempts of creating new types of money in today's context. Today's talk will be based on the book I just recently wrote. And I have a few books here today, so I'll be giving them out as part of Q&A. It's in Thai, unfortunately. So, English versions are still being worked on, but hopefully it'll be of interest to some of you who are our native Thai speakers. This book is not available for sale. It's online, downloadable PDF. So, yeah. You're interested, there'll be Q&As along the process, and then I'll be giving that out as part of it. Now, let me talk, I'll divide the talk to two parts, right? We're talking about cryptocurrency and decentralized finance today. In the first part of the talk, we'll talk a little bit about what money is and what cryptocurrency is. And then the second half, after break, we'll come back and talk about decentralized finance. But I want to highlight this statement, okay? We think money is money because society just believes it's money, right? Some of you may have read the book Sapiens, and Sapiens famously says that money is a social construct, right? We invent money out of nothing, really, to make our lives more convenient. That's true to a certain extent. Okay, if you read the economics textbook, you would see that there are few benefits of money that has kind of stood the test of time. Why people need to have money, units of account, mediums of exchange, store value, and so on. But in reality, there's so many attributes and benefits of money that maybe we want from it. And we've used many types of money throughout history before we arrive at the current money system, where we use bank notes, coins, bank accounts, or even digital money. And this will be relevant to our ongoing discussion of what money of the future may look like. Right, but to highlight what I mean by this, let's take a look at some examples of historical money, which you may find perplexing. This picture is a picture of, actually, does anyone know what this stone is called? Anyone seen this before? No? No? Okay, there goes the chance of me to give away the first book. Okay, that'll be a bit. Sorry? The big stone. It is big, right? It is big. I mean, it's bigger than a person and a whole. Very good. But I'll reserve this for other questions. Thank you. But thank you for answering this. This is money, right? This is money. This is called rhinestone. This is money. Yes, it's called rhinestone, and it's the people of the Yap Island. Okay, That's a very good question. We'll talk about how people use this, right? So the story goes, this money was used many hundreds of years ago, okay, by the people on Yap Island. Maybe you know the island called Palau, right? Palau is probably more familiar to you guys. You may have seen Survivors, one of the seasons they shoot the series in Palau. It's a collection of islands in that area, right? There's small islands. I think is it the Micronesia? Is either Micronesia or Polynesia? I'm not sure. In any case, okay, these are nations of island dwellers, very good at seafaring, and they would go out on boats like in Moana, right? That boat to explore the sea. The tech wasn't that very advanced, but they lived by. Okay, and one day the Yappies they went to Palau and they saw limestone. They don't have limestone on Yap Island, but Palau has limestone. And the island is like 400 kilometers away. So they love it so much, they carved out a stone disc from Palau Island and carry it back to Yap Island. People love it so much and they want it. I want this stone. Can I have it, please? And they're like, okay, fine, but I don't have that many stones. What are you willing to pay for this? So people started selling these stones. And when they realize people want these stones, they go back to that island to carve out more stones and bring back. And that is when this large stone disc becomes money. Okay. But you may wonder, how do you spend this, right? What's your name? Abhisit, Abhisit, you said that, how can you spend this money, right? Yeah. Let me ask you this. Why do you think there's a hole? And why do you think it's made as around this? How are you going to carry this around, right? You push it around. So this stone is actually, this hole is actually made so they can put, a rod through it, and it works like an axle. So you can wheel it down the road and carry it. Because you need to be able to move money to spend it, right? But still, right? You don't carry this with you all the time. You don't roll this stone along with you in your daily life. So how do people actually spend this money? It turns out they find this very inconvenient. But money is valuable because maybe because we own it, right? And by owning it, it could be in our wallet. But you put money in bank accounts. Is that money with you? No, right? It's not with you, but do you own it? You like to believe so. You like to believe so, yes. So that's how the Yappies spend the money. They keep track of who owns that stone. It could be in your backyard, right? But you said, okay, I'm giving ownership of this stone to you. You don't own that anymore. Even though it sits right in your backyard, it's not yours anymore because the ownership has passed down into the hands of other people already. So what is money? Do you need to own it? Yes, but what does ownership mean? Does it need to be with you? Maybe not, right? Money is memory in the context of the Yap Island. Okay, the story goes, right? They want this stone so much, so people go out and then carve it. There'll be people who order these stones. Okay, I'm going to give you pigs, cows, and so on. If you go out and get me this stone, I really want this stone. Fine. There's a cottage industry of people who work in quarrying, in mining these stones, because, if you want it, we'll get it. And one day they went out to get this stone. Okay, they came back, the ship sank. The stone is at the bottom of the sea. What do you do now? That money is lost? Well, it turns out if you can agree that that stone exists, even though it's not really physically with you, but if everyone agrees that it's the bottom of the sea, well, whoever ordered that stone owns that stone, right? You can still pass down ownership of that stone, even though the majority of people have never seen it. But there are witnesses that, hey, yes, that stone has been extracted, but it's just at the bottom of the sea. Okay, fine. If the whole society can accept that that stone exists, then that money exists, and that can also be spent as well. So that's the fascination of money, right? It's valuable because we want it. It's valuable because we can possess it. And by possession, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to take physical ownership of it. It doesn't need to travel with you, but you can still spend it. If memory is money, memory is information. As long as you can pass on that information to other people, any information can be money, as long as society accepts it. Okay, but that's only one type of money. Turns out there are other ways of dividing what money is too. Fast forward back to today, right? We have banknotes. We have the money in the bank account. Money in a bank account works a bit differently, right? The reason why you think money in a bank account is valuable, not so because society believes it's valuable, but it's because you expect the bank to actually honor their obligation with you. Because what bank deposits are an agreement between you and the bank to exchange what you have today, which people call money, like banknote, for example. You have $100 bill today, and you go to the bank and say, "Can you hold this for me, please?" I say, "Sure, no problem. I'll put $100 into your bank account, and now they issue you with maybe a bank book that has 100 written on it. But in reality, it's not that bank book that matters. It's a memory between you and the bank that they owe you 100, right? A bank deposit is a credit between you and them. It's debt that has to be honored. This is different from the stones that we saw earlier, because the stone we saw earlier is valuable because society thinks it's valuable, right? Whereas the deposits that we talked about is valuable because we think the bank can honor the obligation, the bank can pay the debt to you. This is what economists, starting from 1960s, Gurley and Shaw, call this inside money versus outside money, right? Outside money means it just exists. We pick it up and we think it's valuable. You might as well call this nature's gifts, right? The stone existed, we extract it, it becomes money. Gold existed in the ground, we dig it up, and then we think it's money. It just exists. You take ownership of it, it is your wealth. It is nobody's credit-like obligation. Bank account, on the other hand, it exists because of the IOU relationship between you and the bank, and it's valuable because you think the bank can honor the obligation. And it's spendable because somehow there's a mechanism for you to say, hey, you know what, that $100 bill I put with you, I don't want it anymore because I transfer ownership to my friend who now be your creditor instead of me. Okay, it is a liquid transferable debt. Another person's asset, my money, my deposit in your bank is your liability, right? And these are the two main types of money that we use in the economy. Outside money that's backed by social contract. The social construct that Yuval Harari was talking about is more about the first one, right? Where we pick up stones, where we pick up shells, glass beads, gold, precious metal, and call this as money. But the second type, inside money, is created from an economic obligation between participants in the economy. So therefore, we can call this an economic contract versus the social contract. Okay. There's another aspect of money that is interesting, right? We use cash quite predominantly in the past. Cash is an encapsulation of the concept that money should be tied to some object, maybe physical object, right? Go back to this. This stone is money. If you take possession of it and you don't separate if you say the ownership of this is proof of where it is. If it's in your backyard, it's yours. If it's moved to somebody else's backyard, it is theirs. That's a physical money like cash, right? If it's in your wallet, it's yours. If somebody picks it from your wallet, a pickpocketer takes your wallet away, it is now theirs. We can take the legal aspect of stealing aside, but just by the properties of money itself, banknotes and coins, they're the properties of whoever hold them, right? We call them bearer instruments. We don't put names to banknotes. We don't put names to coins. Whereas when this money became spendable ledger through memory, shared memory, now that money is in an account with your name on it. It doesn't matter where that money is because that money has your name written on it. You can be far away. That money can be in the bottom of the sea. Your name is still attached to that piece of stone. And this is called an account-based money versus a token money. Again, this concept has become more popular recently, starting from a paper by Brunemeyer, James, and Landau in 2019 that talks about how we can create digital currency. Okay, that's a very quick fast forwarding of the monetary history, but this is where we are today. Now, let me recap why cash is important, right? Cash is important because it's permissionless. When you spend cash, you don't have to ask for anyone's permission. Whereas when you spend your money, right, it could be through your bank account transfer, or for some other countries in Europe and US, it might not be a bank base. It could be a non-bank digital wallet, for example. If your money resides in a database, the database is owned and controlled by someone, because a database is something humanity constructs, right? So you have to ask permission. Hey, can I transfer my money to my friend, please? Okay, the bank, most of the time, they don't object to this, but they can, in principle, object to this transfer. So it is a permission system. Even though it has your name written on it, you don't have the authority, okay, to change the number in the account. You have to ask the information system administrator to please change that information for you. It's memoryless because when you spend cash, you don't even know where this dollar bill came from, right? Maybe it's passed through so many hands already, but as long as you think it's legitimate, it's within your hands, you'll feel comfortable with holding it. And when you spend it, the person who accepts the payment also feels comfortable with accepting it as well. But when you have an account-based money, it's perfect recall, right? If you have digital accounts, for example, everything is recorded in a digital ledger. So in principle, it doesn't have to be forgotten ever, right? There have been lots of discussions about should we have the right to privacy in the digital age. Our transactions, our search histories, and so on. A lot of countries are now talking about should we be anonymous? Should information aggregator comply to our request so that if we want this data removed, would they forever remove this information from the forever database of internet? But for cash, only people who are privy to that transaction. If you spend it at a cafe, the barista knows that you bought that coffee, sure. But other people who aren't present at that transaction, they don't need to know. But if you talk about digital information, then anyone who has the access to the visibility of that information ledger, they know that you bought coffee, even though they weren't even there. And finally, is an anonymity with cash, right? That gives you that privacy. But a lot of information systems that hold information we call money today, they have to be KYC. And that is a result of regulations like, actually, let me use this opportunity to ask you, information can be anonymous, right? When you post on web boards, you don't have to tell them who you are. But for money, why is it important for them to know who you are? Anyone, any thoughts, ideas? No? Why do we have to tell banks who we are when we open bank accounts? Can't they just open accounts for us without knowing who we are? Just put yourself in the shoes of the banks. If you're a bank, I go into the bank and say, here's a billion baht. Can you please accept this? Why do you have to know who I am? Maybe our money comes from illegal sources, illicit sources, so that, yes, illicit sources, so that, we may worry that, hey, that billion baht, if it came from illegal sources, I don't know whether I want to be part of that, right? Because there may be regulations in the country that say, hey, if you are part of money laundering operations, whether you know it or not, you're also faulty. You're also guilty by association. So banks may have to ask, hey, if I don't know where that money comes from, I don't want to be part of your big operation. That's part of it. You can make this argument further and further, because at one point in time, there are banks who accepted money without asking who you are, right? In the world, there are places that do that for you, right? But then we start having regulations and saying that, no, actually, let's not do that, because once you have anonymity associated with holding so much cash, God knows what they're going to be using that money for. Maybe you've seen the series, right? 24. Maybe you guys are too young for that series now, but financing of illicit activities can actually endanger countries. So it's a rule that we created. All I want to say is cash is just one type of money, right? We use a lot of money in our lives, but they're different. Okay, they work differently. But we can if if that coffee costs you 140 baht, most of the time you can pay in any ways that you want, quote unquote, that I wouldn't say any ways completely, but there's so many ways you can pay 140 baht. And the merchant would say, thank you for your payment, and here's your coffee. So this is a picture. Okay, I'll translate this into Thai for you guys to see as well. If you go to any monetary authority in the world, they would keep track of how much money there is in the economy, in the ecosystem. Broadly speaking, we classify money into what are the obligations associated with the thing we call money. The international nomenclature would be things like M0, M1, M2, and so on, right? M0 would be very narrow money and would typically comprise things like currency and reserve accounts. So currency in this respect means banknotes and coins. The dark blue part here in this graph is cash, right? The big part in this graph, this is Thai's money supply, by the way. The green part is bank deposits, right? That's like M1, M2, depending on your definition of how liquid that deposits are. So this spectrum of money already tells us that there are so many types of money in the economy. We can spend them, people accept them, but sometimes we want to make distinctions between them because, as we saw earlier, how they're created and why they're valuable can be pretty different, okay, depending on the type. Sometimes you call the very narrow money the monetary base, right? The currency is what gives us the unit of account. We have banknotes so that in our country, our jurisdiction, people do transactions using that currency. Currency as in, exchange rate currency, not the quantity or the object, okay? Now that people use Thai baht in this economy, when you have banknotes, you deposit banknotes into the bank will also issue deposits in baht as well. In principle, they can actually issue deposits in other currencies as well, but it's because in this economy, the baht is used more prevalently as a unit of account. So the inside money that we saw earlier is created in the same unit of account as the predominant, mode of transactions in the economy as well. Okay. For Thailand, only 8% of money in circulation is cash. And cash has these properties, right? The majority, more than 85%, if I recall correctly, they're deposits. And deposits are inside money, have very different characteristics. Okay. I want to hold off on this. We'll come back to discuss this point subsequently about why this is relevant, okay, to the discussions of money today. More technical now. You can start dividing types of money in many ways. On the right-hand side, we have the money flower from the Bank of International Settlement report in 2017, I think. They started classifying things we use as money under different aspects. So this flower is a Venn diagram with many aspects that could potentially overlap. And it's been pretty popular as a tool to describe different types of money recently, because we saw earlier, right? There's so many things we use as money, and there may be more than one way of classifying mutually exclusively what the types of money are. So we have like electronic, universally acceptable, issued by central bank, peer-to-peer, and so on. So I was writing a paper for the Bank of Thailand Symposium, and I based on this book, and one of the aspects that is pretty useful in classifying money is not based on what they are, but why society believes it's valuable, right? Whether it's a social contract or it's an economic contract based on inside, outside money definition. So this box is a different way of classifying money in a 2x2 dimensions. The first set of dimensions is outside and inside money. And the second set of dimensions is whether it's token-based or account-based. And the third dimension, denoted by the pictures, the colors of the icons, is whether it's issued by the state or is issued by private entities like banks, for example. And what we could see from here is that in the modern economy, what we see as outside money tend to be issued by the state. We have in the left, bottom left corner here, gold. And gold is colored black because it's not issued by the state, it's not issued by private entity, but it's nature's gifts. It just exists, right? And then we pick it up and say this is valuable. In the past, we used gold as money and currency, right? Gold coins were used as both money and also units of gold coins were units of accounts in how we quote things. And then our monetary system changed over time so that now gold becomes a reserve asset that backs other types of money that we issue in the country. In Thailand, for example, if you want to issue banknotes, we have to go back and look at our foreign exchange reserves. Do we have enough foreign exchange reserves to cover the banknotes? And I think regulation says we have to have at least 60%, if I recall correctly, okay, in certain types of valuable assets to back that up. So gold has now become the reserve, but it is because of this that we're able to have things like banknotes and coins and so on in some countries, but other countries we need not to have, we need not have that, right? There are other countries that have the status of legal currency that they can just issue banknotes and then society has to accept them as money. This is not new, right? Historically, during the years where the Mongolese Empire took over China, right, and became the first Mongolian dynasty, they also issued paper money, not backed by anything. And then people just accepted it. And then no problem, right? So that's the fascinating thing about money, that if people accept it's money, yes, it works, but sometimes people don't. So we migrate more toward the private inside money, which are the IOUs between one another. This one is a little bit more stable because it's backed by the ability and the willingness of the debtor, okay, to honor on that obligation. In other words, outside money is something we just create as society. Before we had stones existed. We carry stones back to that Yap Island. Suddenly, the person who possessed that stone can now use that stone to buy things. It didn't exist in that economy before, now it does. So we, as a society have come to kind of restrict the issuance of outside money. To tie this back to the story about the Yapese Island, what do you guys think happened to that limestone? Do you think it's used as money today in the island? Who would ever want it, right? But let me tell you a story about why people stopped using it. It is way before we started using the modern currency. There was an Irish-American captain called John O'Keefe, right? And these were the exploration days where people were sailing the ocean with ships to discover new continents. Captain O'Keefe was shipwrecked and he was washed ashore on the Yap Island. And then the Yapese were very kind people. So they nursed Captain O'Keefe back to health. He was grateful. They loaded his ship with fruits, food, and so on, so that he can go back to the United States. But one thing Captain O'Keefe noticed when he was on the island was that, wow, this country has a very interesting system of money. People were accepting these limestone discs as payments. And one thing that ship captains or ships need in the old days was resupply base. A lot of the island countries or even the port towns in the past, there were resupply bases for the exploration ships so they can load on fresh produce, food and water and so on. So when you go on to these ports, you have to trade for food essentially. What Captain O'Keefe realized was that, hey, actually, I don't need to have anything valuable because if these guys want these limestone as money, they were extracting these limestones using very primitive shell-based equipment because they were isolated islanders, right? Whereas the Western economies now have metal-based tools of extraction. They were carrying this back using boats, not ships, right? I said earlier, you imagine boats in Moana. It is that kind of boat that they were using for seafaring in that region. But when we talk about the exploration age, we're talking about big ships that can carry a lot of cargo and also sail very stably through the ocean. O'Keefe came back with tools. O'Keefe came back with people. O'Keefe came back to the Palau Island and extracted a ton of all these stones, and then go back to the island and bought supplies using those stones. Okay. What do you think happens to the Japanese economy when we have this new addition of stones? Yes. Fantastic, fantastic. You're flooding the market excess cash. I know it's written in Thai, but I hope you take this as a a token of memento from your participation in class. Thank you. There's so much money, right? So much money in the economy that becomes worthless. Very good, very good. Sorry, I forgot to ask your name. What's your name? Matt. Thank you, Matt. This is what we call today inflation, right? So much money, but it's not that the island is capable of producing more pigs, more fruits. Same amount of goods, more money, prices skyrocket. So people who used to have money, yes, you still have one stone, no problem, but one stone can buy less stuff now because people don't want that stone anymore. Stone becomes more plentiful. It turns out the Japanese were also privy to this, and they said, look, there's a lot of new stones that come out because of these Americans, Europeans. So we're going to mark the stones. What are the original stones that the Japanese mine themselves? We're going to accept that. For European stones, they're fake money. We're not going to accept that as payment, right? So there have been attempts of trying to distinguish between different types of money because they knew that having too much money chasing too few goods is not good for the economy, especially for the people who gave up their pigs, their fruits for the stones in the past. Now suddenly to find out that, wait a minute, I used to spend 5 pigs for this. Now you can only buy 2 pigs. That's not good, right? It hurts the savers. So there were attempts of trying to curb money supply. A lot of things happened in the Japanese islands in those days, and eventually they stopped using that money altogether. But as Matt said, there's so much money. If you don't do anything, there'll be inflation. So they had their own ways, okay, of QT. You can think of these mining as like a quantitative easing in today's perspective, right? So much money, same goods, so inflation. So they wanted to ease back on that a little bit. Same thing that happened in the past, happens today, happens throughout history. But it turns out in today's context, that kind of money is not the main money, right? There's so much other types of money in the economy as well, is that yes, money supply does matter, but the money supply that matters in today's economy, there are many ways of creating it and destroying it, whereas in the past, most economies were accepting just outside money. They were just accepting these stones. They were just accepting gold. They were just accepting cowrie shells. This is what led to the demise in the gold standard era, because when you have too much money, yes, there's inflation, but when you have too little money and your economy grows too fast, if you insist that you need to have money to buy things, then you have to exchange things for money, right? In other words, you have to use your goods or your purchasing power to buy money. Inflation means money loses value, but deflation means money becomes expensive. So when money becomes expensive, it can actually create problems for you as well. Because imagine if you start using these stones as money, right? And there's only so much money around. One stone used to buy 5 pigs. You borrow 1 stone, you're going to get back 1 stone in 1 year time. Now 1 stone buys 10 pigs. You borrow 5 pigs, now you have to pay back 10 pigs. Just as inflation hurts savers, deflation hurts borrowers. And borrowing is a big part of how the economy works. Because if you live in an economy where nobody can borrow, then imagine you want to one day become an entrepreneur. You have to save up until you can have everything to set up your own business, because you could be stuck in a situation where you borrow 5 pigs and you have to pay 10 pigs in the future. In that case, nobody wants to borrow, right? Another reason why we have different types of money, like, the inside money, the bank notes today. not banknotes, sorry, deposits today is kind of tied to the fact that we allow institutions like banks to create money. And we allow them to create money because it gives us access to our future purchasing power. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about that subsequently. And that's how the modern financial system works. Money is tied to credit because we start wanting to link to our future, not just our present. Right? So inside money, as you can see here, is almost, actually not almost always, it is 100% private money. We allow private institutions to issue money today if it's inside money. But if it's outside money, like gold, like stone, we don't allow anyone other than the state to issue this. I know that I put down private bank notes down here. We used to allow private entities to issue outside money in the past, but it failed. Okay, so as of today, nobody is allowed to issue outside money except the state. All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about the financial system through the banking perspective. You guys probably have heard stories about why banks are called banks. It came from the Italian/Latin word banca, right? It came from the Renaissance age, where a lot of Italian, there were city-states back then, now they're part of Italy, right? A lot of Italian city-states, they were hubs of international trading. You have Florence, you have Venice, you have Genoa, and so on, right? And a lot of these Italian merchants, they were also very good at money and also finance as well. They created things like banks. The banks in the past, they were essentially people who sat on benches. Okay, banca literally means a bench. There were people who sat on benches in commercial districts so that they have the visibility to see what's going on, right? So not only they have the traffic to get their customers, but they also have a pulse on what's going on in the economy, so they know who they can trust, who's good for their money, who they can lend to, for example. Right? So banca is bench. Banchieri means a person who sits on the bench, but literally also means banker, right? And they are the money lenders of the Renaissance era. There's historical records of money lenders throughout history, even pre-Christian calendar, because money lending is as old as profession as human civilization. But the words came from this because a lot of what we use in modern economy traces its roots to the Renaissance days in the 1600s. So much so that the word bankruptcy actually came from Italian word like bancarotta. It means broken bench. People who were the bankers, maybe they weren't able to pay their debt or whatnot, right? People got so angry and break their benches. I don't know where that story came from. But if you read or look at Google Translate, okay, you can translate the word bankruptcy into Italian. Today, we still use the word bancarotta for that. Okay. Okay. The role of financial system. Banks, what do they do? I'm going to summarize the role of banks into two big parts. Okay. You read textbooks, you would see several definitions of what banks do, but I separate into two big categories and three small subcategories. Okay, let's talk about the three small subcategories first. The first subcategory is asset custody. They keep your wealth, and this traces its roots back to the Roman Empire, where in the old days you used to have money. Yes, they use gold coins and so on, but you might not want to keep gold coins on you. So what do? You go to people who can store the money for you for convenience, right? And you go to places like temples, because temples are built with different structure from the commoner, right? They're built from marbles, from stones. Whereas if you are a person, chances are your dwelling will be made from wood or something that's a lot more flammable. So you would trust the temples to store your wealth. The temple is also well guarded by security forces, and also it's a place of faith and trust. So you trust them that you put your money with them, they won't take it away. In today's context, asset custody is a little bit blurry because when you put your money into the bank, you're kind of lending to the bank. Okay, you're not asking the bank to keep your bill, because when you say custody, it means when you take out your $100 bill you give to the bank, when you want your money back, the bank has to give exactly the same bill. That's what custody means. But because money is fungible, we don't care which $100 bill we get. So the bank could kind of get away with giving you a different $100 bill than the one you put in. But a true asset custody in today's context would be you have jewelry, you have watches, you have gold bar. You ask the bank to keep them for you. They would offer you safety deposit box services. You put your watches in there, you go to the bank, you get the same watch, right? The bank can't give you a different watch, but the same make, because you do want to have exactly the same watch back. That's what we mean by asset custody. Keep it safe for me, please. In the past, people used to pay. Actually, today, people still pay institutions to do this. These are safe boxes. The second one is payment exchange. Payment and exchange, I classify them together because paying someone, it means you are parting with your money in exchange for goods and services. If you are parting with your money in exchange for other assets, like real estate, stocks, bonds, we use the word exchange, but in reality, you're kind of paying them, right, to buy the stocks and bonds. So I classify them together for reasons which will become clear in a moment. The third category is capital allocation. It's a classic role financial system. We have savers, we have borrowers. Borrowers want money, savers want to put their money to work. We don't have any way to connect them easily. The surge costs, agreement costs, monitoring costs, and so on, so that we have intermediaries from brokers, markets to financial transformers like banks, insurance companies, so on to connect the two together. That's the classic motivation of the capital allocation story. Some textbooks would further subdivide this into wealth management. That's you have money. Can I put money into financial assets like mutual funds, stocks, bonds, so that it grows in purchasing power over time? That's also risk allocation. Will be like, I have money. Can I buy insurance contracts, please, so that when my house burns down, somebody pays me. I can get rid of that risk for me because there's a risk pooling mechanism from the financial markets. For my definition, I pull the two together because wealth management, risk allocation, they achieve through different forms of financial contracts. Everything comes down to the main distinction between the first two and the last one, that the first two, they occur today and you're done, right? I am gonna put my gold with you. Please keep it safe for me. Okay, great. I have to verify that you have gold. You give me gold and I have the proof of gold deposit. And that's it. It's easily transactable because we see that the gold exists today. Same thing with payment exchange. I'm going to pay you money. You're going to give me coffee. I see that you made the coffee for me, so I pay you money. There's a concept in the capital market called payment versus delivery. And what that means is when you pay for something, are you getting what you're supposed to get, right? And a lot of the clearing house and settlement mechanisms that exist in the capital markets exist truly for this purpose, that when you pay for something, you're really getting what you're paying for. When you buy stocks in the stock market, you paid them, yes, and they're also giving you the proof of ownership of that stock. If it's a physical exchange, not difficult, because if this paper is money and this is what you're buying, you see that they exist. You just change hands and you're done. But if it's digital information, I see in the accounts you have money. Do you really have money? I see in the accounts you have the stock certificates. How can I be sure that you really do have the stock certificates? Would I be sure that you would deliver the ownership of that stock certificates into my hands? So a lot of the financial infrastructure that takes a lot of costs and transaction fees is built on connecting the ownership of things across different information systems. When you transfer money to US, to Europe, for example, why do you think it's so difficult to transfer money? I have about 3 books to give out still. If I transfer money from my bank, okay, in Thailand to a bank in United States, for example, money is information. Why is it so difficult to transfer my money to even my account, United States? We can abstract the point of the, transferring my money to somebody else, because you may say, okay, I need to know that other person exists. But I'm just going to transfer my money from my account in Thailand to my account in United States. Any thoughts? Why is it difficult to transfer? Yes. Okay, currency differences. Currency differences. Again, commemorative gift for you. Currency differences. Anything else? If I transfer dollar from Thailand to dollar in the United States, that will eliminate currency risk. Anything else that might be a problem? Time. Different working time, different time zones. Interesting. Laws and regulations. We can think of many things, right, that could impede this. I'll tell you in a moment why it's difficult. What's your name? Max. Matt and Max. Okay, I'll try not to confuse the two. Thank you. Thank you, Max. It is difficult because money in the bank account is the bank's debt to you. Right? Imagine transferring debt. Would my bank be willing to transfer money out? Yes. Hell no. I would love to transfer money out, because by transferring money out, they no longer owe me. I can reduce the debt. But the other bank in US, why would they accept that transfer? Because by increasing the balance in my bank account, they now owe me. Yes, I'm still the same person, but it's a different relationship. Bank in Thailand versus bank in US, they're two different entities. Why would that bank want to incur liability to me without getting anything in return? The most difficult part about transferring money is not about information. It's about transferring what makes money valuable, transferring the asset that's backing that liability. So in the past, when you transfer from bank A to bank B, the money transfer might be, okay, I want to transfer $1 million into the other bank. Can you put money into a wagon and carry that over to that bank, please, so that I can adjust the ledger? I reduce the debt, yes, but I also have to reduce the assets backing that debt. And the receiving bank has to book increase in liability along with an increase in assets backing it as well. So yes, money is kind of like information, but behind that information, there's also other things that make that information valuable. This is in the context of inside money. So exchange rate is one thing, okay? That's a risk we can eliminate. Operating time is also another thing, okay? Regulation is also one thing that impedes transfer, but the true reason why transferring money is so difficult is because transferring debt is difficult. And things like SWIFT and so on exist because of this. Let me tell you a little bit, okay, about the historical money transfer network. In the old days, people needed to pay, right? People need to pay things, just like today. And one of the biggest movements of people, goods, services, and trade across time was the crusade, right? You're mobilizing resources in Western Europe and then going to the Middle East to fight along that route. So you have to coordinate a lot of logistics, and part of that it also involves paying people as well. So what do? You have to carry money around. Yes, that's also one thing. But can you settle for payments, okay, without carrying that gold coins around with you? Turns out you can, because if in the end you never cash out the gold coins and you accept the proof of existence of gold coins as money, that might as well be money. Throughout history, banknotes, they were created as part of a deposit receipts first, right? You deposit gold with a money exchanger. The They will keep the gold for you. They give you the gold receipts, and then you can take that gold receipt to the next town and cash it out, and they'll have the gold for you, ready for you. If you think it's too inconvenient to keep cashing in and cashing out the gold, you might as well just keep it as a receipt and give the receipt to other people. And if that receipt doesn't have your name written on it, that's even more convenient. And that's what historical banknotes were like. They were bills that were created so you can exchange that bill for something that's valuable. And whoever holds that bill now owns that money, right? It's an IOU that is a bearer instrument. So this is an article from BBC. There's a financial journalist called Tim Harford who wrote a book called 50 Things That Made the Modern Economy. He also made blog posts, podcasts for the BBC website as well. And this basically talks about the international money transfers throughout history, right? Different points in time. And also the creation of the modern banking system. You may be curious as to why one of the biggest money transfer company, Western Union, transformed its business. In the old days, Western Union wasn't a money transfer company, right? It's a telegram company. It sends messages. But why is it that messaging companies act as money transfer agents? Well, because part of money transfer involves sending messages. Right? I'm going to send information to you that this guy will reduce his balance by $1 million to increase the balance of another guy by $1 million. That's also messaging. But you can send a message, but you also need to be able to withdraw that money as well, right? So if you were working on the operation that we talked about earlier, that we were discussing why is it difficult to transfer money across banks, it's because that IOU relationship occurs across different entities. Imagine if you're the only one who is the relationship holder to the customer. Let me give you a context to compare against. Transferring money to different accounts across banks is difficult, but transferring money to different accounts in the same bank has always been very quick. And you may wonder why. Now I hope you see why. Because when you transfer money across different banks, it's changing the relationship between two banks. When you transfer money within the same bank, that bank is still the ultimate counterparty. I'm just changing the creditor, right? But the bank is still the debtor under both cases. I transfer $1 million from me to Max. Sure, now the bank doesn't owe me anymore, but the bank owes Max. But as long as it is the same bank that holds this credit relationship, they'll happily change the name of their creditor to Max very easily. And that's how money transfers like Western Union was able to manage this, because if I'm the transfer agent, I accept money and I also disburse money, customers have the same relationship with me, just me alone. So I can very quickly change the ledger that Max now owns $1 million, but now it's my problem to carry the money to the location where Max might withdraw. If Max doesn't withdraw, no problem, right? I'll be happy to change that ledger, that instead of me owning $1 million, now Max owns $1 million. But I have to strategically think about, if I'm a bank and I use to hold $1 million account with me, now Max owns that $1 million instead, would Max's behavior of withdrawing that money be different from my behavior? As long as nobody withdraws the money, no problem at all. But if we want to convert that balance into other things like gold coins, it is my problem now to coordinate logistics. And that's how the Templars were able to do this in the past, because they were the ones coordinating the logistics of the crusade. So they were also the one coordinating logistics of the money as well. So as long as they can handle the logistics, they can hold the ledger or the banking relationship with anyone, and also adjust the balance transfers very easily. Unlike the comparison of transferring interbank today, because you don't know whether that money will be transferred to them or not. I'm at the receiving bank. I would not be happy to enter into this new credit relationship without knowing that there'll be assets backing that relationship. And that's what the SWIFT network, and so on are there to do, right? The SWIFT network replicates the telegramming part of the Western Union, but the SWIFT network also needs to have a way to deliver the money to the destination. Western Union does not need to instantaneously deliver money, but they take the risk. And that's why throughout history, we see entities like postal offices, for example, becoming banks as well. If you go look at the UK, for example, the Royal Post used to work as a bank as well. You can open deposit accounts with them because they work exactly in the same way, right? This article also talks about something that's also interesting, right? They also talk about the medieval fairs, like a trade fair in the past, where people would come and meet and buy things. So you have to come with money, right, to buy things, gold coins and so on. But there was one time a merchant in Lyon, okay, maybe not the merchant in Lyon. That could be just the example that they gave. But there was one guy, right? There was one guy who started realizing that, hey, instead of paying with money, as in coins, if people started accepting credit from banks, IOUs, line of credits and so on, as payments as well, I actually don't need to have money today to buy all these goods. I can just give you the credit notes instead in exchange for the goods. And if I'm able to settle all the trades, buying and selling, netting the transactions together, I don't even need to have any money today at all to do any transactions. So this acts a little bit like the working capital management class that you may have seen, right? When you have the companies that might be able to take goods first and pay later and collect money fast, so you can have a negative cash conversion cycle, negative working capital, which essentially means you don't need to have any money at all, and you're able to conduct trade because you were able to get the supplies from someone without paying and then sell to other people and receive cash in return. And that was the birth of using credit notes as money in the past, right? The only difference between what we have as working capital management today is that it's like a private relationship where we have these IOUs, but the relationships in the past, they were encapsulated in pieces of paper that can change hands. So that was another example that became money in the end. Another interesting aspect was that you could denominate these credit notes as papers, as numbers in there. But the thing is, when you buy, say, a bottle of alcohol gel, what would you denominate the price as? I could denominate this price in baht, in US dollars, okay, in Turkish lira. It's up to me, right? And that's the role of currency, because in the past, even though they have money, right, they would express the worth of their money under a different currency. They would use the Ecuador mark, was a private currency used for settlement among the network of the bankers, even though each different country might be using a different unit of account in their own respective ecosystem. So I want to bring this up because currency does not need to be money, right? Currency as a unit of account can be anything. It's just a ruler which you decide to measure things in. That thing may or may not be tradable. All right, let's come back to finance theory a little bit. Okay, why do we use debt and why debt circulates privately and publicly as money? The thing is, when we have debt as a financing instrument, right, compared to other types of financing instruments available, like equity, for example, if you have to change hands in equity ownership, it's a little bit more difficult because the person who decided to invest as an equity owner in a certain company may decide to do so because he or she believes the founders and the teams of that company. They do the due diligence, right? So they're willing to stake their entire future, or entire future is a little bit too extreme. Now, stake some of their financial future with this company, so they invest as equity. If you want to give the equity ownership, the stock, to somebody else, they may not agree with you, right? So it becomes a little bit more difficult to give that stock for other people instead. But for a debt contract, it's pretty informationally insensitive because a debt contract has a payment terms well specified. In essence, you can even not consider the ability to pay of the borrower and enforce that anyway, right? My company is failing, I can't pay you. Sorry, but you have a debt contract with me, so I don't care how well your company does. If you say you're going to pay, you have to pay. And I may resort to different means, okay, of encouraging you to pay me. This is what it means by debt as the least informationally sensitive, because under asymmetric information, adverse selection, moral hazard, and so on, yes, people still mistrust each other, but by using debt contract, it's a contract that we can kind of navigate all that mistrust issue the easiest, okay? So what this is meant to say is that equity could have been instruments that change hands as money, but people don't use equity as money because it's informationally very sensitive, right? When you change ownership in equity certificates, it's very difficult. The public stocks that can change hands today is a result of institutional arrangements that reduce the informational asymmetry, so that we don't have to worry so much. Still, the value is not as stable as debt contract. So this is an idea since Townsend 1979, and also reiterate again in Dan Gorton and Holmstrom in 2018. And also explains why we see that a lot of money we use today is inside money. Yes, it could have been other instruments, but in the end, it's a debt instrument that uses money more widely. And we talked earlier about different versions of what we call money throughout history, right? And different debt instruments. The thing I want to say is money is it's a special kind of financial instrument that is very liquid, can change hands very easily. In the past, it used to be anonymous because that gives you that liquidity. But today, even though that money is not anonymous like bank accounts, we have mechanisms that allow that contract to change hand very easily. So this might as well be treated as money. Okay? It's an evolution over time of things that can preserve the value because of different reasons, and can also change hands because we also need to have that instrument be usable as a medium of payments or medium of exchange. So we have examples of the early banknotes in Chinese history. This is called the Fei Chuan, I think. They call it flying money because literally it's paper that can fly away. And it was issued in exchange for a more sturdy, more bulky, and a little bit more inconvenient copper iron coins in China. Fast forward to around post-Second World War, we also have Chinese banknotes circulating, but this time it's redeemable for gold. This gold became the kind of outside money that was more widely used in the 20th century. On the top right-hand side, you also have banknotes issued by private banks in the US. They issued this, and this allows whoever holds this to exchange it for $5 worth of gold. And eventually, this private banknote was issued so much that people decided that it's too inconvenient to have so many banknotes in one country. In the end, the government decided to discourage. Okay, I wanted to say ban, but they didn't really ban. They discouraged the use of private banknotes by saying that, hey, the government is also going to issue a banknote that's redeemable for gold coin as well. But anyone who use private banknotes, feel free to use it, but we'll introduce a tax so that anytime you use private banknotes, we'll increase the transaction cost, and then it gets taxed out of existence instead. And this is how the private money became private money that could be outside money, so to speak, because in the end, if you're backing paper with gold, gold is outside money. So by association, this is also outside money as well. They decided that let's just have the government be the only one who can issue this instead, because outside money is social contract, society agrees is valuable. So let's not have too much of that. Okay. I skipped this page But I want to go back to this. There are two ways that people talk about banking. The first way is the most common. You look at the balance sheet of the bank, left-hand side, the bank has loans as assets. The bank has also other assets that could be valuable, liquid and illiquid and whatnot. And it has liabilities on the right-hand side. And your deposits are also bank's liabilities. And it's placed very, very high on top. Okay. The traditional view of banking is that banks would accept deposits, right? Accept money as deposits and then lend that out. This would be corresponding to this picture, right? You have money, you give money to the bank now has your money, right? And you, instead of having that money, you have a deposit instead, which is your credit obligation between you and the bank. Right? The bank now has your money, the bank can go around and say, hey, who wants money? I have money now. You can borrow from me. The bank gives that money to whoever wants to borrow. The bank does not have that money anymore. The bank has a loan, right? That same money is now in the hand of someone else. And someone else spends it, right? And it somehow makes its way back to the bank again. A different person this time comes to the bank and say, hey, I have money. Can you keep this, please? Okay, fantastic. I'll keep your money safe. Here's your deposit certificate, and so on and so on. That money comes back to the bank. The bank goes to the market again and say, who wants money? I have money now. The same amount of money can circulate. And along the way, it creates more money. Used to have money as gold. Now we have money as bank deposit. Same gold comes back to the bank. Deposit still there, and that money is lent out. And the money comes back to the bank again. More and more and more deposits are created, but it's only same amount of money that we started off with. Okay, that's a difference between the monetary base, like outside money that we talk about, gold, banknotes, and so on, and then the inside money, the deposits that can be created as part of the financial system. And that's why those money are important, right? Because what we count as money, they are part of this credit mechanism. Now let me go back to this slide again and talk a little bit about the fascination of the modern financial system. In the previous slide, I showed you the bank lends money that it receives to other people. What if I told you that banks can actually give you the money they create? Imagine this, right? Suppose you go to the bank and borrow money to buy a house. The house costs $200,000. Okay, fine. You go to the bank. I want to buy a house, please, $200,000. The bank approves and they ask you, would you like this in cash or as bank deposit? What would you guys like? Maybe you want cash. The bank says, no problem. I have cash for you. Did you bring your wheelbarrow? Because it's going to be pretty heavy to take out the $200 cash, $200,000 cash. So you can say, okay, I want bank deposits because it's pretty safe. What the bank can do is to issue you $200,000 deposit right away without needing to even have that $200,000 in cash. Because remember, a deposit is your obligation with the bank. They can increase this deposit. No problem. But that also means they're accepting that they are your debtor, right? They create debt obligation of $200,000 by giving you that form of money. But they do this because on the left-hand side, they book a loan, right? They book a loan of $200,000 or maybe even more. Then they could charge you fees. You may have seen that. And under some circumstances, banks may charge you fees for borrowing. So you could borrow $200,000, but you get $199,000 instead because they charge some amount as 0.5% in this case as fees. So they give you less money than what you incur as debt to them. And that's how they make money, right? This is called credit creation banking. And the key difference between the two types, intermediation banking versus credit creation banking, is for intermediation banking, I need to have what society accepts as money to give to you. Because you demand that you lend me gold. You demand that you lend me banknotes. And banks cannot create gold, right? Banks cannot create public banknotes. In the past, they used to be able to create their own banknotes. But now banks have to find banknotes for you. But if you say deposits are fine, now we're in the second category, credit creation banking. Banks give you money as the credit relationship between you and them. So this is what leads to regulations of banking entities that can create deposits. Okay, there are two sides to regulations of deposit-taking institutions. The first aspect of deposit-taking institutions is that people deposit money without realizing they're lending to the bank. Because remember, if you're a depositor, you up here, you're the bank's creditor. You are lending to the bank, and you may not realize this, right? So some regulations of deposits are essentially why deposits are so high above in the bank's balance sheet. Because in the past, without regulations, you give the money to the bank says, I am accepting this certificate as deposit as a proof of our credit relationship. So whenever the bank fails, bancarrota, as we said earlier, the bank doesn't have money to pay, the bank says, oh, but I have other creditors. They're secured lenders. They're senior lenders. So I have to pay them first. Without financial regulation, this deposit may be very junior down the line. And you as depositors may not have your money back. It is because of banking acts that deposits are very high up the bank's balance sheet. We demand banks pay depositors first before we pay other people as a legal restriction on them. Okay, that's number one, okay, why we regulate deposit-taking institutions. But this is also true for intermediation banking. The other reason why we regulate banks is because we know they can create money, right? They can create money to buy anything they want. You can think about loans as securities that we issue to the bank. The bank issues money to buy securities from us. And they can do this limitlessly because remember, they make money, right? They create money to buy things from us. So we have regulations on what their asset risk looks like so that they don't create money to buy risky things too much. If you buy too many risky things, well, risky things can lose value. But debt on the right-hand side does not change in value, right? Your asset can be impaired, but your liabilities will not be. So that's the other aspect why we regulate banks, because we don't want to have asset liability mismatch. Okay, let me recap. Two things why we regulate banks. First, a deposit is really a kind of debt. So we have to have regulation to elevate the rights that the depositors have above and beyond other creditors. Because most of us, when we give money to banks, we don't really think we're lending to them, when in principle we are. Think about why they pay us interest, right? We are lending them money. We're not asking them to keep money for us, because if we're asking them to keep gold for us, we pay them. So if we ask them to keep money for us, we really should be paying them too if they're keeping our money safe. But they pay us because they really want this. And they also pay us so that it becomes more like a debt relationship between us and them. And credit creation banking means banks can create money to buy anything they want. So we want to make sure that they don't buy things recklessly, because anytime your asset value is impaired, accounting identity holds. So if your deposit has enough equity to cover, the impairment goes to the shareholders of the bank first. But if the bank doesn't have enough equity reserves, then it's the creditors who start getting hit. So when we talk about bank reserves, right, sometimes they count bonds and so on as well. They really mean people who are not depositors, right? We want to make sure that banks have enough funding sources, which are not deposits, to essentially take the risk when the bank's asset is impaired. The first guys who should take the risk are the equity investors. Then when equity investors are wiped out, it will be the creditors, like the people who lend to the banks knowingly, right? Finally, it will hit the depositors. So we want to have a lot of buffers before we work our way through the shields that we have. If you look at the tier 1, tier 2 reserve, you might wonder, why is it that bonds count as reserves too? These are essentially investors that are the shield before that damage is penetrated, has penetrated the shield all the way toward the credit, toward the depositors, who are also the bank's creditors. But we place them really high on top of the claim ladder. Okay, how do we for time? So we have some time, so we will come back and continue our discussion of money. Okay. So again, today, private money circulates widely, and their value is backed by the ability to fully convert that inside money, that debt obligation, to something valuable. In other words, it's backed by our belief that whoever issues money has both the ability and willingness to repay our obligations to them. Okay. And we also see that technology allows different forms of money to become more like money. You know, some people might call this moneyness. Banknotes, very, very easy to spend. Bank deposits used to be really hard to spend. Now it's become a lot easier. Prompt pay is one example, okay, of an innovation that allows you to start spending money that is essentially private debt, but it can change hands quite easily. Okay, I won't go down that route of talking about how it works, but essentially it acts a bit like Swift, okay, but allows you to make sure that when you do the number transfer, things we accept as balance sheet left-hand side of bank are settled across banking providers more quickly. So in Thailand case, real time. All right. So what I want to talk about here. Okay. We regulate the inside money because it's debt. There are also other things that are like debt, but they're not classified as money. But we do worry about them because when you have debt, it's very easy to have debt on debt on debt. Right? The subprime crisis is one example, but every financial crisis occurs because we have debt on debt relationship, that whenever the originator of that debt cannot pay, it cascades into that credit chain. Okay, you can think of this as a credit chain. So if someone is not willing to pay, the bullwhip effect will work its way through the whole credit chain, just like the supply chain. And that's why we have monitoring of systemic risk, why we have financial regulations, why we have international organizations that come together to try to monitor what's going on. One example was the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. One of the problems that led to the downfall of the ecosystem was that we had so much credit relationship tied up as derivatives contracts that nobody knew who is exposed to whom, how much. And then in the end, it's almost like, you know, this picture isn't the true picture, right? It's almost like everybody bets their money on one single house, right? And then that house burns down, yes, but there are so many people who bet their odds on that same house that whoever is a counterparty who has to pay doesn't have enough money to pay, right? And when that person doesn't have enough money to pay, he's broke. But when he's broke, he's also, you know, he also has other credit relationship with other people. When he becomes broke, it means the lender to that guy is also broke. The lender to that guy is also broke, and the whole chain goes down. The cascade of asset liability relationship, debt-like relationship that can spread out through the supply chain, credit chain. Now this brings us to where Bitcoin came in, right? A lot of the fintech movements that sprung up has really taken off since 2008, partly because the financial system has proven that unregulated, they weren't to be trusted really, right? The subprime crisis was really a story of unchecked risk-taking that ended up bringing down the whole world, so much so. And there's a lot of distrust in the financial system. So if you think that you don't want to trust financial system, especially banks that hold, you know, 80–90% of what we think of as money today, and we don't want to be just numbers in their databases. We see examples, right? Which country was it recently? Lebanon, that was on the news, that they shut down, right? Banking system. You go to them and say, I want my money back. Say, sorry, no, we're not going to give you your deposits back. And if you have that kind of fear, then the next best thing to do is hold gold, right? And holding gold is pretty inconvenient for a lot of people. And that's why we had gold vaults in the first place. That's why banks had security deposit boxes in the first place, because you don't want to keep possession of these things on you all the time. So can we have digital information that acts like gold and that doesn't get bound by the restrictions of the physical inconvenience of having gold? They didn't say this explicitly, but they started off by talking about cash, because Bitcoin is not really new. It's a part of an initiative that existed so many years ago, prior to Bitcoin, of privacy advocates, that if we start living in a digital world, anything digital is not private by design, as we talked about earlier, right? You live on somebody's database. Maybe somebody would have access to that database to change things like bank accounts. And even if they don't change things, they may see things about you that you don't want them to see. Unlike cash, where you have both the permissionlessness, we have the privacy, and also we have the, forgot what the other one was. Permissionless, privacy, bearer instrument, something like that. But that doesn't exist in the digital realm. So there've been a lot of movements that try to create information system that has similar properties to cash, and they didn't really work. Okay. Sometimes it comes down to, well, you have to, if you talk about cash, then you want to be able to use it in a way that people will have no authority over that information. But if that provider is one single company and that single company fails, then we still trust in that company. Might as well just trust banks instead. So this message board came, and they Satoshi Nakamoto, you guys all know the story already, and he came up with this idea that let's have a peer-to-peer e-cash. And he outlined the idea in this paper. Okay. I want to highlight the word cash and electronic, because these are two things that they shouldn't really be able to coexist, right? Electronic, database, cash, private, permissionless. How can this go together? Because if you're in somebody's database, somebody must have permission. So that's the heart of this Bitcoin movement. So we talked about why Bitcoin already. Let's summarize, right? Cash is bearer instrument, cash is private, a cash needs no permission, but digital information is all against that. Digital information that we know of is account-based, right? You log on to web boards, you have to create an account. They may not ask you to reveal who you are, but you need to have an account as a starting point to start putting information into the database. And you also need to have an account so they can send things to you. An account and address, they're the same thing, right? And a bank account is an address where people can send money to you. It's a virtual address in the bank's database. Digital information has perfect memory. Digital database users have different rights. Some can see, some can make changes. Now, having a digital database that anyone can make changes is not difficult. You just open a Google spreadsheet, okay, and allow the public to access this, to see this, to make changes to this. But this is going to be hell, because if you allow anyone to write anything down, can you trust that information as money? Anonymous web board that does not require login is an open data system, right? You can post whatever you want on there, and people don't really care because they just read it. Okay, they don't use that information to designate, oh, this guy is rich, so this guy can now buy things. It has to be something that society can accept as a measure of value. So you need to have a way to record information freely, but that the outcome of that information is still accepted by participants in that database. So much so that people are willing to accept that as value and be willing to pay for this. Just like when that limestone first came to Yapese Island, people say, hey, I want that. I'm going to give you pigs for that. So I need to be able to create something like that stone and then have people want it enough to pay for this. And this unit that's on this information system, if people believe in it, if people want it, people willing to pay for this, it can also be money, just like that Yap stone. I started with this example because that's a story that you often hear at Bitcoin conferences of how what we accept and believe as money can also be. Okay, so I'll talk about a high level of how this database works. Blockchain is only one component of it. Because remember, we want to have an information system that anyone can record. People accept that information is true, and nobody can prevent you from using it, which is very difficult. To have it be like that 100% is impossible. But how close to 100% are we able to accept? Right? Let me reiterate that. You cannot have 100% permissionless information system because somebody has to record information, right? And that might not be you. But how close to 100% permissionless do we want to get? Do you want it so that 99.99% of the time you record information and it goes through? If we're happy to accept that, then this system might be able to give that to you. Let me talk to you briefly about how this is done, okay? You send information in there, you send instructions. Anyone can send instructions, but they will not process this for you. Because by processing it, by recording in the database, it means everybody accepts that that transfer of information or wealth or money has already occurred. So to prevent somebody with the monopoly rights of database, we want to distribute the recording, the accounting, okay, of that database to anyone who wants to be part of it, right? The distributed nature of blockchain, actually distributed nature of database is the first aspect that so that we don't have one single person who owns one single record. And this can be done with anything. You can have distributed Excel spreadsheet if you want, that syncs every now and then. Doesn't have to be blockchain. The second aspect is recording of information. You can have distributed database where if one person records the transactions all the time. What's the point, right? What's the point? You can see, but you can't make changes. So the next step is to how to make it so that the right to record information is not centralized to a single entity. So that's where the mining process comes from. The mining process essentially gives the winner the right to record information. So all of us can participate in this mining process. And one round I may win, another round you may win, as long as we are reasonably sure that not one single person or groups of people will end up recording these transactions all the time. It's kind of like permissionless because you still need permission of the person who records transactions, right? But if they don't have any incentive to censor you, it is as close to permissionless as you can get. That's the decentralization of the authority, okay, to record information. So this brings us to why blockchain. Because if I give you the right to record, the question is how long a right am I going to give you? I'm going to be giving you the right to record maybe for 15 minutes. For the next 15 minutes, you're going to be the one who says which transactions are recorded. That's when the game ends, the tournament ends. Then next round, we start again. Whoever wins gets to record. Keep going like this. So we record information in blocks because we want to make sure that we can take turn to record. And it's recorded as blockchain because we want to make sure that the blocks that you just announced to everyone that, hey, this is a new transactions, it actually has ties to the previous information recorded. That's why it has to be linked in a chain. So blockchain isn't everything in Bitcoin, right? Blockchain is part of all the little pieces that you put together so that you get as close to cash as possible in this digital database, which is everything against what cash should be. Whether or not you should review yourself, web bots don't ask you to review yourself. You can record information. This digital database, I don't need to review who I am too. All I need to review is this is my address. Can you send that money to this address, please? Done. You've seen movies, you've seen PO boxes, right? Post office boxes. You don't even know who you're sending to, but they give you, hey, send to this PO box. That's a way for you to preserve your identity, and they can still send it to you. It's a social rule that we tell people, okay, who these accounts belong to. But in reality, from database perspective, you don't need to know who owns that account. All you need to know is who has access to this address, who has a key to this house. So if I'm in this house, I own everything that's in this house. If I'm in this house, you can send stuff to this address. And if I'm in this house, I can also send stuff from this address out to other people too. As long as you own that key to that house, this house is yours. You lose that key, no longer yours. Okay? So this is very different from a bank account, because the person who owns bank account is you. Somebody else may have password to this. You can go to a bank and say, hey, my password is compromised. So can you please cancel all those transactions, right? That account belongs to you as a person, not to the password. But if the ownership of the account belongs to a password, this is pretty much a bearer instrument kind of thing. Because if this is a house, whoever has a key to this has ownership to it. How is this different from this is a banknote? Whoever holds this banknote has ownership to it, right? In other words, it turns the account-based nature of information money to be more like token. Token, you prove that it exists, it's done. You have access to this paper, it's done. You have access to this house, it's done. I don't care what your name is. But for account-based system, it's tied to your name. If the person who has a password is not you, that transaction will not go through. Okay, and that's how we get these features. It's kind of decentralized, but it's coordinated. Okay, and Bitcoin is created as a reward for you winning the tournament. Now we have all the pieces together. We have information that can be created only by this tournament, so you can't just print new money. Okay, this money can be spent, this money can be kept, this money can be tied to an address and a house, just like how money is tied to a piece of paper. So whoever owns this piece of paper, whoever owns a house, own that money, and it's in your key, what we call private key, which is linked to your address as well. This gives us digital cash. It turns information money from account-based into token-based money. But if you think about what makes this money valuable, it's social contract, because this is not different from the Yapi stone. It exists, and people say, okay, let's use this. We don't have enough of this. Can we go make this? We can't just conjure this out of thin air. We have to go to Palau to query it. It costs you money to find this. So we don't have a big inflation. We don't have John O'Keefe who says, "Oh, I have a way to get this money more efficiently than other people, so I'm going to flood the market with this money." No, everybody has to use the same old shell-based tool to get it. Actually, it becomes more difficult to extract over time. But in essence, it's still outside money, right? It's social contract as opposed to economic contract. But if you're willing to accept that, just like we were willing to accept different things as money throughout history, it might as well be money. Okay, but it's not currency, because currency is something that you agree we are going to denominate prices in. Now, I could denominate the price of this in marbles, okay, in grains of sand. If grains of sand have very unstable value, I might want to denominate the price of this bottle of alcohol gel in baht, in dollar, in euro instead. That's the difference between money and currency. I think we're at a point now we can take a break. So let me pause here and take a quick break, 15 minutes, not quick, right? Normal break, 15 minutes. So we'll begin again at 10:55. Okay, fantastic. Thanks for coming back on time. So we'll push ahead and go through with our talk. Before break, we were talking about why money and cash were different, and also why Bitcoin is as close to cash as we can probably get. And also Bitcoin has the properties of a digital outside money that's more token-based and account-based. So it gives you that benefit of a physical token like cash, even though it resides in a digital database. But still, right, it has cash-like properties, but for money to be widely used, it also needs to have stability. A lot of the money that we use today are private debt that are denominated in national currencies, just like we saw earlier that we could denominate the price of anything in any currency that we want. But the reason why we denominate things in certain specific currencies is because of the convenience along our supply chain. There's a paper by Matthias Dobke, and I'm not sure who the other co-author is, in 2017, about the role of money as a unit of account. And the main idea there was that if you have supply chain and also credit chain, by denominating your transactions in different units of accounts along the supply chain, you can lead, you can introduce asset liability mismatch, and you can also introduce the friction that once you start transacting with other people with so many currencies, it can be inefficient for that supply chain. So the natural tendency for different economies to have their own units of accounts or their own currencies is a result of an economic optimization problem along the supply chain that we as society agree that using this unit of account is more convenient. And this also coincides with why in the past gold used to be both money and currency, but now gold is neither money nor currency, but it is what is at the heart of foreign exchange reserves that make national currency valuable, right? We keep reserves as gold to make sure that we have enough value of gold compared to our issued banknotes, even though we could issue banknotes without any backing, but we rely on the trust in the value of those reserves to make sure that when people start questioning the worth of our paper money, we have something to convince them that, hey, this we just didn't create out of thin air. But on the other hand, if you're willing to believe in the social contract that has nothing backing it, it can be whatever you want it to be. Okay, this coincides with another strand of research in macro finance that money also has its bubble value, right? It may have zero fundamental value, but it could be in the interest of the economy, the society, to pretend that this thing has value because it facilitates trade and economic activities. And you can see here, right? We were able to accept this as cash or e-cash because of some properties. A digital database is never permissionless, but we want to get as close to permissionless as possible. So having a decentralized network structure is what makes us reasonably comfortable that our information will not be censored, okay, will not be outed, will not be written by anyone. So that's why we have the narrative of you can create any cryptocurrency that you want, just build a new blockchain, right? You can create new digital outside token money that you want, but how secure is the decentralization integrity of that database? Because if it's controlled by somebody who has majority rule in that database, they can in essence censor transactions, and they can in essence do whatever financial institutions that you may have a mistrust of, they can still do. Right? So this is an example from Fidelity, the asset management, a wealth service provider in US. They have a division that research digital assets, and they talk about why Bitcoin is, one should view Bitcoin very differently from other cryptocurrencies that are also secured by blockchain technology, but may not have the same network structure. But still, right? It is valuable because of social contract. So if it's valuable because of social contract, then we've seen a lot of money that resides on social contract in the past that loses its place as money. We saw the Yapese stone, hyperinflation Yapese stone caused people to stop using the Yapese money. But we also saw gold that was used as money, but is now no longer used as money, even though you can't inflate gold, right? Because it doesn't suit the economic requirements of an economy. But there are also other databases, other blockchains that allow you to create new information in there as well, right? Bitcoin does not allow you to create any information at all. It only allows you to send information that's already on the database. But other blockchains like Ethereum, Avalanche, Polygon, and so on, they allow you to write information in there. And that information can be new numbers, right? You can write codes in there. When people talk about smart contracts, they mean computer codes written directly onto the blockchain, and it can only be computed by the nodes, by the computing nodes. Now, you cannot compute the instructions yourself, but rather than the nodes just recording the instructions to send money, like in Bitcoin, in certain blockchains, the nodes also have a role of computing the code instructions that's written on a blockchain. Okay, so that's what people call the smart contract blockchain or the virtual machine blockchains. You can only send instructions. You can't process them. The nodes have to do one to process them. And that information, if created using computer codes, we call tokens. Okay, whereas information that's created as part of the mining process, or broadly speaking, we call this a consensus protocol or consensus algorithm, how to decide who becomes the winner of the competition to record information. That information is called native coin. Bitcoin, for example, is native coin. Ether from the Ethereum blockchain is native coin. And the role in that database system is that it provides you with the incentive to provide the public service of computing power to record and process transactions for everyone. Right? So we're now into the realm of the public good, tragedy of commons, a free rider problem, and so on. So by having these reward through the forms of coin distribution, it gives you the incentive to do so. But tokens can be created just by writing information to a ledger, right? So you can have a spreadsheet like Google spreadsheet and write numbers in there and give numbers to everyone. Anyone can do this. So it is also an outside money of a kind, okay? But the way you create it may not inspire so much confidence in it. So the value may be a lot more subjective, questionable, because it's just so easy to create this information. So when we think about it is, you can think of native coins as gold, okay? You can create tokens as just paper, right? We had no underlying backing with it. But you can also create tokens or smart contract information as promises backed by something, like securities, like deposits. As we saw earlier, inside money, the numbers mean something because you expect the debtor to honor that debt. That $100 in your deposit that you got by giving the bank $100 note represents the economic contract between you and them. So you can create a receipt like this in a database too. But this requires you to code the aspect of this credit relationship, this asset liability relationship between you and someone else into the contract as well. Because otherwise, if you just quote 100 into that database without any meaning, it's just like printing pieces of paper and writing 100 on it. It has no meaning. You have to give meaning to it somehow. All right. So now this brings us to DeFi now, decentralized finance, because in essence, the financial system is like one big giant database, right? That contains sub-databases that have to interact with each other. The bank in Thailand and the bank in the United States, they are different databases. And those databases represent different economic relationships between different people. You can adjust numbers in that database, but you have to be able to ensure that the numbers represent meaningful economic relationships as well. The payment system kind of, act to ensure that. So you can see how Bitcoin or blockchain solve the payment problem completely by requiring everyone to be on the same database. Because if bank A and bank B are owned by the same parent bank, right? In other words, A and B becomes branches of the same entity. We're back to money sending problem of the Templars. We're back to money sending problem of Western Union. If everybody has the same credit relationship, no problem. If you make it one step further by saying that, oh, this is not even credit relationship, this is just one shared digital ledger of who owns what, with no asset liability relationship at all, because everybody accepts this number as valuable because it's outside money. It's as if you say that instead of holding gold today, right, physically, let's have a centralized database. Centralized is kind of perhaps controversial to say, but let's have a single database. It can be distributed, right? But just one single database that everybody accepts the veracity, the truthfulness of this database, and say, you don't own gold in your physical realm anymore, but this gold is now represented by numbers in this single database everyone shares. If I give it to you, you own it, okay? And it's your equity, it's your net worth. It is nobody's obligations. There's no creditor, okay, that issues this. In other words, it's a social contract between you and everyone that this number, once given, is valuable. So it kind of solves that payment problem very easily because you put everyone on the same database. It's an easy problem to solve. But in any case, you bring back the problem to other aspects of financial systems, which can be represented by numbers. So there can be questions of what else can numbers represent? Okay, it can represent equity ownership. It can represent numbers in different currencies. It can represent how your position in a derivative contract. It can represent how many insurance contracts you're buying. They're just numbers, right? And again, numbers can be written on anything, can be written on a piece of paper, can be written in your memory, can be written in any digital database, but you accept numbers, then you value numbers because of some economic value behind those numbers. So we can Yep, the usual process, right? I think every 2 hours we have to reset the internet connection. Okay, so let me run through that again for people on Zoom that may have lost the connection before then. We keep numbers in databases, okay, and databases that keep numbers, they're various. In the past, where we don't have any database, we keep numbers on papers. You buy a share of stock, it is written on a paper. There's also a counter ledger at the hopefully the company that sold the stocks to you, so they know who are their shareholders, right? But if you want to facilitate the change in ownership, you have to have a database that allows ownership to change names very easily. And security depositories are entities that facilitate that process. And Thailand is part of the Stock Exchange of Thailand because it is one of the solution to the payment versus delivery problem we talked about prior to break. That when you pay money, how are you sure that you're going to get the goods that you want? So in this case, stock certificates. So when you have a blockchain as a ledger that records information, and you can also put names of who owns that number to it, you can think about blockchain as a huge depository that can store anything on there. And there are many things that numbers can represent. So natural usage of information in blockchain is as proof of participation or proof of receipt. So fundraising, you have to issue receipts. You give money to someone, right? And then they'll give you some certificates and say, yes, I've received money from you. A stock certificate is a bit like that too. So the fundraising process throughout the timeline of the crypto/DeFi world changes name over time, right? And in the very early days, around 2013, we say the whole process is initial coin offering ICO. And if you are a Bitcoin enthusiast, this word would not make sense to you because Bitcoin, there's only one way for you to really get it is to go be part of the mining process. The other parts you have to buy from someone. There is no one who issues Bitcoin. The only way that new Bitcoin be issued for you is mining. But there are other blockchains that start off from day one with pre-allocated units. Like companies start from day one with non-zero shares. And they'll be willing to sell you numbers in that blockchain, okay, based on your contribution at the beginning. Ethereum blockchain is one example where the from the first moment the Ethereum blockchain was started, the number of Ether did not start from zero. Okay, and you can sell that to other people in exchange for money, and we're gonna call they'll call this initial coin offering, right? And then around 2014, 2015, Ethereum began receiving more adoption. And we saw earlier, you can write numbers into Ethereum blockchain. So instead of beginning a new blockchain and sell numbers, which are native coins, you can start selling tokens instead. It's a lot easier because having someone to join you as a blockchain network is pretty expensive. You have to set up the new infrastructure, right, to become nodes. But if you have those nodes already and you create new information in that node and sell them, it becomes a lot easier. So the ICO boom in 2015, 2016 that ended in 2017, there are different kinds of information. They're tokens, not coins. But back then we didn't distinguish. We still coined them ICO, right? Because we would think of numbers in blockchain as coins, but we saw earlier, structurally, the way those numbers are created are different. Coins are part of blockchain. One blockchain has one coin only, okay? And tokens, they are enabled in some blockchains. And in those blockchains, you can make as many tokens as you want. It's up to you. And then around 2017, 2018, people started using this as a ledger. Yes, but they link it to some investments that already pre-exist, like real estate, for example, right? So they started realizing, wait a minute, are you just selling shares to real estate ownership, but using blockchain as a way to record information as opposed to a security depository? If that's what you're doing, then what you're selling is kind of like a security, isn't it? Then if it's a security already, there's a law that says when you offer security to someone, what do you have to do? Because if you don't follow those laws, you are in breach of securities regulations and we can sue you as a country. So they have a new class of offerings, STO. Okay, these are securities, but offered on a blockchain. But the rights that you get, they're not that different from other things that you may have access to in the past, like a timeshare, real estate investment trust, bonds, blah, blah, and so on. Just a different way of recording information. STOs. Then around 2019, in the past, when we were going to buy Bitcoins, it was pretty difficult because remember, Bitcoin was created as a peer-to-peer exchange. This is what Satoshi said. Okay, I've been working on a new electronic cash system, fully peer-to-peer. You don't need anyone. You can do transactions peer-to-peer. But the problem is if I do peer-to-peer and I don't know who you are, right? I'm identified as Mr. A, you identify as B, and I don't tell you who I am. How can I buy Bitcoin from you? I can send Bitcoin to you, yes, but I need you to send money to me. I don't know who you are, and I don't want you to know who I am too. So how can you send money to me? It's actually very difficult to buy and sell Bitcoin, but it's very easy to transfer Bitcoin. Okay, so let me run that by you again. Transferring Bitcoin is easy. All I need to know is address A, address B, I can send, done. But if I want anything in return, it's difficult because on the Bitcoin blockchain, there is nothing but Bitcoin. You can't expect anything in return. You send Bitcoin, the only thing Bitcoin can do for you, Bitcoin network can do for you, is to send Bitcoin back. So if I want to buy Bitcoin in the first place, I need to exchange it for something that does not exist on the blockchain, like money. And then I have to think about, how do I pay you anonymously? How do I know that it's from you? All those things, right? It is possible, but it's very difficult. And then we have additions of people like, Coinbase and so on, who are exchanges. So they work just like stock exchanges. You tell them who you are. You put money on there and say, hey, can you go and buy Bitcoin for me, please? And they do that for you, right? But now this kind of lose the benefit of Bitcoin a little bit, because Bitcoin was made so that you can do anonymous cash-like transactions. This is no longer cash-like because the exchange knows who you are, right? But if you didn't really mind that and you wanted Bitcoin, no problem. And it actually makes buying, selling Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and other units very easy, because you now have a way to verify or verifying payments in exchange for these coins. So when you list new coins, you create new coins, you want to sell to other people, it was very difficult to sell the coins to people without telling, without revealing. Ethereum was able to do this by just send us Bitcoin to this address and give us an email address. We're going to send you information to your new account on the Ethereum blockchain via this email address. So you told them your email address, okay? But now they're able to link you a little bit, not 100% private, but you were able to give up a little bit of privacy in exchange for the ability to get Ethereum when they initially sold this to you. That was kind of not that difficult because Ethereum announced to people who they are, right? So it's not that difficult to imagine trusting them. But still, doing a peer-to-peer token distribution is kind of difficult until we have exchanges. If you first sell your tokens via exchanges, the onboarding process is very easy. It's like buying new stocks through IPO. And this is what allowed coins to be sold very easily. I say it's close to IPO because when we talk about IPO, we typically have in mind we're selling equity certificates. But in the world of blockchain, we're selling numbers, and numbers can be anything, right? Numbers can be backed by nothing at all, and numbers can be security-like, or numbers can give other benefits. We're going to have to do our KYC, our due diligence ourselves, but it gives us a way of converting baht, US dollars, into numbers very easily through these exchanges. And then later on, people started talking about, can we actually go back to the decentralization and privacy requirements again, because I don't want to go through initial, I don't want to go through exchanges because they know who I am. So can we find ways to actually do transactions directly on a blockchain? You cannot do that on Bitcoin because, as we talked about earlier, there's nothing but Bitcoin on the Bitcoin blockchain. So there's no exchange, right? You can only send and receive, that's it. But on other blockchains like Ethereum, for example, you can create many types of information on there. You can also create rules of exchanging information on there. So you can think about creating a place where you can come and exchange information that you want without relying on exchanges like Binance or Coinbase. So this is called a decentralized exchange. And if the first moment you distribute your tokens to other people, you don't rely on people like Binance, but you say, I'm going to start a new place on the blockchain where you can come and exchange my coins if you want. That's called an IDO. Okay, and this is where we start touching the realm of decentralized finance, because we have a little bit more mechanism of how to facilitate different kinds of financial transactions on the blockchain. I'm going to skip the IFO and stop short here. You can see here, ICO was about selling information on the blockchain. We call them broadly as coin. STO was about recognizing and reckoning that information on there probably has different economic relationships. So if it has a similar economic relationship to a security, it is probably a security. So let's specify it like that. Otherwise, you run into trouble with the SEC. And then the E's and the D's are about where you start your distribution process. The IEO is you distribute it through exchanges like stock markets. IDO is basically you do it yourself. You start a place, you start a table, and people who want your tokens can come to this table and then exchange it. I'll just outline briefly how you do it, right? Suppose you have a table that has coffee and paper, right? You're going to say, my rule says if you want coffee, you can take coffee, but put paper on here. That's it, right? I don't need to know who you are. If you come to the table and you can place paper on here, you'll have the right to take coffee from this table. And vice versa. You put coffee here, you can take paper out, right? Nobody needs to know who you are now. That's essentially how decentralized exchange works. It acts just like you go and buy coffee, and the barista doesn't ask who you are. Just ask, hey, you want latte, right? That'll be 100, please. Sure. You have 100 baht. I have coffee. Okay, let's swap. Done. Very easy, right? It just happens on the digital world instead. But what I want to highlight to you is that when you have numbers, when you record relationships, there are many types of relationship you can have. You can pay money, yes. But when you pay money, what are you getting out of it? If you give money to someone, it's easy. If they give you a paper that says, I have received 100 from you, thank you very much for your donation. It is a donation certificate. The money is theirs now, but they have no obligation to you whatsoever, right? If you look at the accounting process behind donation, donation is booked as revenue and then goes into equity. Okay, and you have nothing with that donation, but you have a proof, you have a receipt, you have like a receipt that says you donated. If you give them 100 and say, hey, you have to give back 100 plus interest, it is 100 that represents your right to go and claim money from them. Even if they don't pay, right, you have a right to enforce it somehow. If it's 100 that says, well, you gave me 100 baht, but every baht you give, I'm going to give you 1 unit of accounting that says any future profits that you're going to get, I'll pay out pro rata depending on how many pieces of this paper or how many numbers you have on this. And also I'll give you the right to have a say in what we're going to do going forward. That's equity, right? You can represent this on the right-hand side. You can give money to other people. If it's a donation, it does not bind you as the recipient. The money you give, and you call it debt, it binds you pretty strongly. And if your money you give and you are gonna get a share certificate, you can do that, but you have to ask yourself, what gives you the trust that you're willing to give 100 today in exchange for some profit in the future? Because number one, you're not the entrepreneur. You're not the founder. You don't even know what they're doing. You can give money, yes, but can you get money back? I don't know, right? In the old days, doing equity funding was pretty difficult because once you give, you can only get profit back, right? You can sell, but it's very difficult to sell equity certificates to other people knowingly, because they will say, why would I want to be shareholder in this company? I don't want this, right? That's why we have a lot of bells and whistles to add so that we make it easier for the unsuspecting investor to not have to worry too much that, am I being scammed, right? Are you selling something that has value to me? There was a case study of the Mississippi company. It was created by National Charter by the French crown. I'm not sure what the year was, right? There was around those years when a lot of European countries were trying to create new colonies in the West, right? We heard of case studies of British East India Company, Dutch East India Company, and so on. France wanted to do this, but France was exploring the Americas. Okay, and they were able to establish a colony in Mississippi. And they did this by raising funds. They sold shares to the investors. And then they came back with news about how fantastic this Mississippi is. Nobody's ever been there, right? Only a selected few were there. They came back with news about how this goes. So imagine somebody sells you equity ownership on Jupiter. You may see pictures of Jupiter, but have you really been there? I don't even know whether that's really Jupiter, right? But, you know, you can buy and sell shares based on that. And kind of similar, right? Regulations today make sure that when you say this is what Mississippi or this is what Jupiter looks like, they are independent auditors fact checking that yes, that's really what Mississippi looks like. That's really what Jupiter looks like. Okay, but without all these accountability checks and balances, you can say whatever you want, right? And then you can buy and sell based on that as well. So a lot of the equity bubbles in the past, in the 1700s, 1600s, and so on, they were based on similar ideas, right? You're being sold promises based on things that perhaps don't exist, or they exist, but they're not like that. But in any case, they were sellable, tradable. So the due diligence process is a little bit more flexible because you know, you don't have to hold and get profit. If I can buy this and sell to other people, I don't care about profit anymore, right? I don't care about the ability for this to generate any income at all. If I am able to pass on this equity certificate to other people at a higher price. Okay, so this is the important part of what a contract is. A contract is like a promise you have, right, with someone. Actually, broadly speaking, when you talk about contract, I don't think we have time to go deep into this, but just want to show you this, that when you invest in, when you give money to someone, right, there are many reasons why you give money to someone. If you give it without expecting anything in return, you get a certificate back. What happens in blockchain is that you can give money as donation and you get these certificates of donation as information on the blockchain. And you can sell the donation certificate to other people. Okay. Just because you give the ability to sell doesn't mean that certificate has any value. But you can sell anyhow. I could be donating 100 baht. I got a donation certificate of 100 baht. I sell to someone else for 1,000 baht. Price is what you pay. Value is what you get. I can pay 1 million baht for donation certificate. But that may not have any value at all to me. Okay, so that's what blockchain enables. Because remember, it's a permissionless system. You can buy and sell and transfer, do anything that you want. Anything can have a price. But what are you selling? What are you buying? The economics behind why different numbers are valuable are also as relevant in the blockchain space as they are in any other space. Okay. This is just some information about why we need anonymity. I think I'll just skip through this. But what I want to talk about is when you have this permissionless system, right? Anyone can use it and there'll be data centers who record it for you. The question is, can we make sure that people don't abuse the system, right? If we have information system, it's a public record, then I see, oh, you're willing to record transactions for me, right? Then please record all these transactions for me. They're junk transactions. They don't mean anything, but I want you to record for me anyway. So please do it. We don't want that, right? We don't want spam. So what we do is we create a rule that says, if you want to record information, you have to compete. There are other people who want to record information too. But we're going to have a limited resource as space inside a block of a blockchain. Within this limited resource, there'll only be so much information I'll be recording. There'll only be so much processing or calculations I'll be doing. So if you really need your information recorded or processed, Sure, you're going to have to compete with other people to do this. And that's what gas cost in blockchain means, right? It's there to make sure that people don't abuse the system. We have limited resources, block space. And this brings us to the trade-off that we see. Because why do we have limited resource? When you use things like AWS, when you use things like Google Cloud, you pay and you record whatever you want. There's so much data out there. It doesn't really cost anything to record anymore. It costs things to record because we want to make sure that our database is distributed. We don't want to have one single person be the data center. It's a trade-off between efficient, right, cost-effective, where everyone concentrate all the investment money into one single database, versus decentralization, where we want to make sure we have checks and balances. We don't want to have one single person be the database. We want to have the ability for anyone to come be part of the process. So in other words, we duplicate the investment cost to however many data centers there are going to be. And if we want this data center provision to be democratic, decentralized, in a sense that anyone can become a data center, the minimum spec that's required to become a data center has to be really, really low, right? This, I want you to picture, suppose I am a bank has data centers, right? They can invest all they want in a data center so that they make the recording information very cheap, almost zero cost, but they own that database. Versus I want to have something like a bank, but I want to make sure anyone can become a data center. So we don't even split, okay? We don't even share the load. Everyone is a duplicate of that data center. So it's a question of how decentralized we want our information system to be. If we want anyone to be able to provide that, democratic process of securing database, that even a laptop can run it, then the specs have to be limited by the laptop. Therefore, the space that you are going to be able to give, how fast the computing network is going to be, you're going to have to trade off the scalability. Okay, so that's the price you pay. You can have a very efficient database that's centralized. You can have a very decentralized database that can never be efficient because it's, contradictory. So that's the trade-off we face. Every transactions you have to pay. So I pull up the transaction cost around May early this year. For those of you who participate in DeFi ecosystem, would recall May as a month where a lot of havoc was happening in the DeFi space. Stable coins like US Terra or the Luna ecosystem started losing value. People started wanting to withdraw that liquidity from this space. And if you have liquidity on the blockchain, you're going to have to pay to record that you've indeed removed liquidity. You've indeed taken money out of the system. The cost depends on how difficult the calculation is, not how much money you're moving, right? So here's some examples. If you're transferring a USDT unit, which is a number linked to a currency, stablecoin, it costs about $60 to move any amount of stablecoin or money. You can be moving $1 billion. You can be moving $100. Cost the same. Right? You can be doing decentralized exchange through different protocols. Sushi Swap is one place where you can, like the table where you can swap paper for money I showed you earlier. It costs you about $170. Okay, to put paper and take coffee out. Doesn't matter how much you are exchanging. That's how much it costs. Curve is another place that's very popular for specific types of goods, stable coins, right? Costs you about $900 for one transaction. That's it. Yeah, that's the price you pay for decentralized database because you have to incentivize. A close parallel to this would be if you're trying to get a taxi ride-hailing service when it's raining really badly. Maybe you have to pay 2-3 times the price. But that's the price to pay because the scarce resource at that point in time, there aren't many cars on the road. So you have to pay them if you really want to ride. Here, there's only so much space inside the blockchain that can record per block. So if you really want to have your transactions go through, you got to pay. Okay, so that's the design. All right, we have about 20 or so minutes left. I'll talk about a high level description of what decentralized finance protocol allows you to do. If you understood the concept of I put this, I can take this out, everything DeFi works like this. Okay, it's an exchange. If I want to borrow money, okay, what do? Here we have $200 worth of paper. If you have $200 worth of paper, you put this here as collateral, I can take $100 worth of coffee out. Because if I just want to take $100 worth of coffee out, I'm not really sure that you're going to come back and pay. So I have to hold something hostage. Right? So this is a bit like a pawn shop where they're willing to give you money, but you have to put up collateral. If you don't put up collateral, how do I even know you're going to come back? Okay, pawn shops, you have to declare who you are because they want to be able to know, who you are and where to get money from and so on. But in reality, you've seen in the movies, right, in the past where you can go to the pawn shop and then they don't even ask who you are, but they're going to give you a different price because they don't need to see you again. If it's $1 million watch, they're going to give you 200,000. You can come back and get it for maybe 300,000 if you want to. But if you don't want it, take the 200,000 and leave. Never come back again. They're fine with it. Blockchain works like this because on a blockchain, nobody knows who you are. Even if they know who you are, remember, they only know that this is the house doing the transaction. If you give the key to someone else, it's the same house, but it's not you anymore. How can they know that you're going to give the money back? Right? The first thing that when you borrow money from someone that they do is they ask who you are, they ask how you work, they ask where you work, they ask where you live. Why do you think they do that? They don't know where you live, where they get the money from. Right? They need to know you exist, you are trustworthy, or in the worst case, you can be found. Maybe you've seen the American show, right? I think it's called the Bounty Hunter, right? Bounty Hunter. When the U.S. legal system allows you to place a bond, a bail bond, right? When you are undergoing the court process, and they say, look, you have to go to jail first before we decide on the process, and if you're guilty, we send you to prison. But if you don't want to go to jail, you can put up a bond, give the court a bond that says, if I don't show up to court, you can take this bond away. They'll take your money instead, and you don't show up to court. Okay, and there'll be people who sell you bail bonds like this because you don't have the money, okay, to put up the bond. So there'll be private financial institutions that say, hey, I'll be willing to put up a bond for you, right? And if you show up to court, you just pay the fees for that bail bond. If you don't show up to court, I fronted the money for you already, and the court already took that money as well. But you run. I need to find you. So they will find bounty hunters to hunt you down so that they pay on the bail bond. In any case, the financial system works on personal identity, right? They don't work on where you live. Where you live is a proxy, but they really want to know exactly is where you are because they need to get to you in order for you to pay back. And that's how decentralized finance system, why they're structured as pools. And then I have to see that you have the money so you can exchange. I have to see that you have the collateral so you can take out the money because I don't want to go to the trouble of hunting you down. It's just impossible to hunt you down. So you need to have everything today in order to do any transaction. So anything that I describe over here, it works a bit like the traditional finance with one condition. You have to have enough collateral. You have to have enough asset for us to do any transaction at all. If you don't have this, sorry, forget it. I can't transact with you at all. Okay. The other details I want to skip because they're kind of down to the decentralized finance stuff already. I'll give you some pointers after this about where you can find additional information. I gave a lecture to the MS Finance last year about how DeFi works in more detail. I want to talk about the high level of the financial system, how it works. So I want to go back to our earlier description of how financial system works. Two aspects: contemporaneous exchange. I have coffee, take the paper. I have money, take the stock, right? That's it's pretty easy. All you have to verify is you have something of equivalent value and they exist, so you can exchange them, right? The more difficult part is the intertemporal credit decision. I can lend to someone if I can really trust them. They don't need to have anything except the ability, my belief in their ability to honor the obligation. That's what credit really means. I'm willing to give you money today because I trust you, and then you can come back and repay later. I'm willing to give you the goods today and you can come back and pay me later because, you know, I'm willing to do that, right? But for DeFi, it doesn't work like that, right? Because the only way for you to trust someone is you have to have enough collateral. You can't just say, I'll come back and get this from you later because I don't know where you are, who you are, where you live, right? And this is the essence, okay? This is the essence of how financial system works and how decentralized financial system works, but it's kind of an approximation. Because if you think about what a contract is, okay, if you take a lecture on contract theory from lawyers/economists, they describe a contract as a 2x2 interaction. Okay? It's a promise or performance given in exchange for a promise or performance. Performance means you can do it today, right now. So when you buy coffee, money is a performance because it already works today, it's valuable. Coffee is also a performance because a barista has made coffee for you. So it exists today, it's valuable today, you can exchange, you're done. That's one type of contract. The other type of contract is, I'm going to get money from you today and I will repay you in the future. The money you give me is a performance that you paid me. But a promise is from me to you that I will honor the obligation and I'll give you interest, I'll give you profit, I'll give you benefits in the future, which you're gonna have to trust me because I don't have that yet today. Okay, that's a difficult part. That's the intertemporal part that we talked about earlier, that, you know, we're taking chances on people. We accept the risk in financial system, right? We know that if you want to open a coffee shop and then suddenly, you know, things don't work out as your business plan, maybe there's competition, maybe people stop liking this kind of coffee, it's not your fault. Okay, we accept that. That's market risk. The thing we want to prevent is you say you're going to open a coffee shop, but then you run away. Now, that's what we want to prevent. So we have regulations and so on, is to make sure that there are consequences, okay, of doing that. And part of that consequence comes from the fact that you know who the other person is, so you know you can trust them. Because if you think about how the financial contracts work, it's essentially dividing up value. Asset equals debt plus equity. Okay, debt is one kind of liabilities. Equity is another kind of liability. We know that asset has some value. We know that when we divide it up, it has to be very similar value. We saw this in finance theory, right? We did in Millam theorem, where under the perfect market assumptions, where there are no frictions, assets, liabilities, and equities, they're basically additive sums of one another. Money in equals money out, risk in equals risk out. Only when where there are frictions, we start having situations where assets may be undervalued because blah, 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 and so on. So by having a different financial contract, we might be able to sell the asset at a higher price. That's essentially how the financial system works. The asset can be something that has direct value today. An asset can be something that has benefits in the future, right? So think about having asset as 100% cash. That's something that can be used as performance today. Or asset as, I use cash to buy coffee machine. I use cash to rent this place. I use cash to buy equipment and so on. So my assets are now productive assets, which will generate income in the future. In any case, that's our definition of assets, right? And then now we're selling claims to that asset. So the heart of security design is that you're selling claims to the asset. If you want to have something that has low risk, you better have something that has enough value to back it up. And I'm going to skip that. And when we talk about stable coins, that's something that we talk about a lot about in recent years about, can we have new kinds of money on blockchain? Stable coin is a bit like debt that you issue. Because if you look at the balance sheet of stablecoin issuers and banks, they're very, very similar. Banks have deposits as liabilities. If a stablecoin issuer, by the way, stablecoins are units on blockchain issued with mechanism and expectation that when people buy and sell that unit, it should be linked or pegged to some value like US dollar. You should have some stable price as a benchmark that you want to be buying and selling at. Stable coins and deposits are very, very similar because deposits, they're debt contract denominated based on currencies. Stable coins are also contracts denominated based on currencies too. The reason why bank deposits are valuable is because we know or we believe banks have enough assets to cover liabilities. So same thing in blockchain, right? If you issue liabilities that are linked to baht, the assets covering those liabilities better be worth more than the liabilities. Otherwise, why would I want to buy those liabilities at 1 baht? Okay, that's one way of creating the stable coin. So I'm going to skip this detail. It's in the lecture on DeFi, which I did earlier. So I want to talk about the process. So this is in a more recent version of a different paper that was writing on stable coin. So if you compare how stable coins are created and how banks create money, they're kind of similar. So let's talk about steps. Okay, step 1. If you want to get a stable coin, you may have some collateral. So you put this collateral up and say, hey, here's a collateral. It's 200. Can I get some stable coin, please? Sure, I'll give you stable coins. If your collateral is worth 200, I'll give you 100. Okay, great. Now I have stable coins in my hands. But I put my collateral up with them. If I want my collateral back, I have to go and repay because the stable coins they gave to me, they lend to me, right? So I have to repay my stable coin loan to get my asset back. And that's how one stablecoin protocol works. I'm going to talk about this using a different language now. This is not blockchain. This is your balance sheet, and the collateral is your house. I have a house worth 200. I need to borrow because I want to finance my business. Can I borrow 100, please? The bank says, no problem. Your house is worth 200. We're willing to lend to you 100. Great. Now this house, that's yours. I have dotted line because it's not really yours. You put to the bank as collateral. The bank says, okay, with the appraisal, I'm willing to give you 50% LTV. It's worth 200. I'll give you 100. So the bank gives me, okay, money. But this money is not banknote. It's not gold. It is deposit that they create. Right? They just created new deposits worth 100. Then they give this deposit to me. Now I have this deposit in my hands, which I have this deposit because I have debt. I borrow the money from the bank. The bank issues money, okay, and give to me. It is their liability, but they're willing to give this liability because it's backed by debt that I borrow from the bank. And this bank, this debt is in turn backed by a house collateral that's worth way more than the loan that I gave to the borrower. If you understand this picture, this is how modern banking works. We just put everything into the blockchain and it works in the same way, except that the collateral here, it might not be a house, it might be something else. Okay, instead of having a house as collateral, they might ask me, you want to borrow 100 baht, right? Do you have $200? If you have $200, put that up as collateral. I'll give you 100 baht. Okay, here $200 worth of money acts as collateral instead of 200 baht worth of house. I think I may have confused the unit here, but I think you get the idea. Right? It's a replication of how financial system works, but you use different things as assets and liabilities on a blockchain. And that's how DeFi works, right? I'm not going to go down to the details of how other protocols work in more in specifics, but I wanted to point this out because this is banking, right? And banking creates money. So if we have banking procedures written through smart contracts in the blockchain, it can also function like banks too. It can also create things that act like money too. If we can spend deposits in our bank account, we can also spend stable coins just like money. And if our deposits are created in dollars, in baht, but the bank's asset may be in yen, euros, and so on, we don't really mind as long as the bank's assets cover the baht denominated liabilities that they issue. Okay, I'm going to skip this, skip this, skip this, skip this, and talk a little bit about what happened to the Terra stablecoin. We saw earlier that was how you can create, okay, how you can create the money, right? Another way of creating money is to say, hey, you want $1, right? Sure. Can you give me something worth $1? I will give you $1 banknote or coin for you. So in the past, it could have been, give me some gold, right? I'll transform that gold into a coin for you. If that gold is worth $1, that transformed gold coin is also worth $1. If you want to get gold back, then give me that coin. I'll melt the gold for you. Now you have, different shapes of gold, but still also worth $1. That's essentially how money creation was done in the past, right? You transform one type of material or money into another type of material. So here they would say, look, if you want to have 1 unit of stablecoin, US dollar Terra, give me $1 worth of Luna, okay? Another coin. If you have $1 worth of Terra, one coin, sorry, you can sell it, okay, for $1 worth of Luna. This looks a bit like, you have money, you have gold, melt that gold into a gold coin, and you can melt that gold coin back into gold again. There's nothing wrong with this, right? $1 versus $1. But the thing is, if you look at a balance sheet, oh, by the way, this process is like how countries print banknotes too, right? In Thailand, we print banknote by saying that, oh, if we want to have 100 baht of banknote, we better have some assets backing that banknote. And if some foreign countries want to say, I don't want this Thai baht banknote anymore, can you do something with this, please? We will have our foreign exchange reserves to buy it back from them, essentially, right? So that's a different way of creating money to what we saw earlier. Now, you act like this, right? If you have $1 worth of Luna, this used to be your equity, and you can exchange it for $1 worth of stable coin. So if you look at the balance sheet of the customer, right? You're just exchanging your wealth from $1 worth of something to $1 worth of another thing. No big problem. If you look at the person who sells you the banknote, now I think I kind of skipped the detail a little bit too fast, but really it's a bit like printing banknotes, right? So you want to have $1 of banknote, give me $1 worth of something, and I'll give you $1 worth of banknote. And then if you want to sell one banknote to me, I'll give you $1 worth of something in return. But the thing is, if you look at what this ecosystem uses as the asset that backs the banknote, it is something they create. To give you some context, $100 worth of banknote in Thailand could be backed with $100 worth of gold. That's fine. And we believe that because we didn't create that gold, right? Somebody else created that gold, and we hold possession of that gold. So when we print money, money can be by itself, right? But if you really are curious and you don't want our money, we'll be happy to buy it back for gold. So that supports the belief that our banknotes are valuable. Here is a bit different because they say, if you don't believe that our $100 of banknote is valuable, you can sell it to us. who give you something worth $100, which we create. At that point, we're like, huh? But this banknote you create, and this something that you give in exchange for that, you also create. So where's that value coming from? If you go one step further, you created this something, right? If you create something, it is your liability, right? If you look at the balance sheet of central banks, banknotes are central banks' liabilities. You might not be able to sell banknotes in exchange for gold anymore in today, but they're still counted as the issuer's liabilities. It might be backed by something, might not be backed by anything, but it is a liabilities. So here we have a case where we have banknotes, which are the liabilities of the issuer, also backed by another liability that they issue. There's no asset. There's only liabilities backed by liabilities. On the left-hand side, it's whatever you think it is. That's actually how some currencies in the world work as well. But if you want that currency, no problem. Okay, we are happy. We'll be happily participating in this system where we think that the banknote that we print out of nothing is worth something. That's fine. But once we start questioning, wait a minute, why is this banknote valuable? Then there's nothing to prevent the loss of belief, because we don't have anything that is exogenous to us, like gold, to back it up. Okay, so that's what happened. I'm gonna skip all these details too. And when people don't believe the liabilities are worth something, people run to exchange their liabilities, and that's what bank runs are. You don't believe the bank is able to pay anymore, and you don't believe the bank has enough money to redeem the deposits, so you go and redeem the deposits. And then when you do that, more and more people do that. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay, so bank runs happen, and runs can happen in finance wherever it's located, off the blockchain, on the blockchain, physical, digital. It all comes down to this relationship: assets equals liabilities plus equity. When whatever you issue, they are liabilities. You're selling this to someone, they're your liabilities. If you create that relationship, you better be able to honor that relationship. Otherwise, somebody is going to have to pay. Okay, we're going to skip all this, and talk about the challenges of decentralized finance. We talk about this in great detail, that a lot of the financial system works in this credit chain because we're able to trust other people to a certain extent. Without trust, we have to have collateral. There's only so much collateral in the world, right? You're able to borrow credit card loans, for example, without putting up any collateral because they think they can get the money from you. But if you remove that ability to trust and have to put up collateral instead, we're not going to have a lot of the intermediation actions. That's at the central part of the financial system. And Professor Krugman was talking about this in the context of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin doesn't really need to trust who's who. That's also great, but it means you can only have, spending relationship. You can't have credit relationship. You can't have a system that links us from the future to today. And that's the challenge in decentralized finance. Okay, and more. And when you see the financial system, we talked about the 2008 financial system as a credit chain that broke down. The same thing can also happen anywhere, right? I was looking at the relationship between stable coins, which can be viewed as credit-like relationship, and they're linked everywhere, right? They're linked everywhere. On the upside, you can see this, right? It's on the blockchain, but there are also parts you can't see. We saw the aftermath of the crash in May 2022. We have a lot of companies that we think they're DeFi companies, but they crashed because we don't really know what they were doing. They're not on the blockchain, right? Without visibility, it's very hard to see where risks are brewing. And when the credit chain breaks down, it's pretty hard to stop the credit chain breaking down. So that's what we call the systemic risk of a system, right? And skip all this as well, and then conclude so we can end on time. Okay, so today's talk is about crypto and DeFi, but it's more really about how financial system works and why banks are very important in the financial system. We saw how bank money came to be a dominant force in the current financial system, but that's because we have a lot of rules and regulations put in trust, so we can trust that their ability to create money and link the future to today isn't abused. We're at a juncture where that relationship is being challenged and also being enabled, because in its core, the financial system is about information. If we have a new way of creating information that's free, as in free to do, free to use, and difficult to identify and regulate, everything that could happen in the current financial system could also happen on the blockchain. Without the ability to know who's who, we lose the ability to come together in times of crisis to defend. So the bank and credit institutions, they're essentially data companies that allow you to transfer wealth stored in the form of information across form, space, time, and place. We see that, right? You can transfer all this. But the true capability of the financial system is how to actually take risks in the presence of uncertainty and information asymmetry. We saw that we can do this without taking risks, collateral-based system that works. But the true benefit in helping the underbanked people without financial access is really how to actually take a chance with people without collateral. I think that's where the blockchain and DeFi has some way to go before we can address that. Right, so that's all I have for you guys. I hope that's useful for this class. And if you wanted more on this, I have a couple of the English-based lectures on this website as well, right? There's a playlist, DeFi, and there are 2 classes that I gave for the finance program here in English. So you can follow up on that if you're more interested on the DeFi part. But here I just wanted to stop at the money and the financial systems and markets part. Okay, so that's it. Hope you guys found this helpful and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.